posterity. Just letting everybody know that we are recording so we can share this with others. We are at the hour. So I don't know, Jessica, if you want to jump in and kick us off, and then we will move through.
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. So glad to see you on a Tuesday lunch hour. We have an excellent discussion lined up for you. Those of you, it's nice to see some familiar names on the attendee list. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jessica Schiller. I'm a professor of education at Towson University and also the director of the Maryland Center for Community Schools. We are co-hosting this webinar along with my colleague, Ellie Mitchell and Most and MD4CS. And she'll introduce in a moment, but I just wanted to say welcome to everybody. Really glad to see you. We're really excited for this webinar. It's the first, hopefully, of many where we bring research and practice together in conversation around community schools and to what we're really shooting for, what we're aspiring to out there with our over 600 community schools this year. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Ellie.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Joe and Charmayne, for joining us. This is also kind of the beginning of the first of a series we hope to have focusing on research and practice together. We do have a kind of small group that we've been calling our Research Practice Network, mirrored after the National Research Practice Network. And if you're interested in joining that, please let me know. We will have our contact information at the end of the slides. And also, we can't forget that this is Community School Coordinator Appreciation Week. We're going to do some shout outs in a minute. But the Maryland Coalition for Community Schools has been around since 2016. And we really have done a lot of the work around forwarding community schools through the policies and the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which also is a key reason why we have more than 600 community schools now. And now we really want to serve as a partner with the state, with the new center and others around making sure we have quality implementation and that you all who are doing this hard work have the resources and information you need to get your work done well. So this is exciting day, exciting week. And we'll go ahead and learn a little bit more about you in a second. Just want to give some tips for this particular webinar. We are in the webinar feature of this. So we're going to use the chat box for introductions and information sharing. So if there's something you want to add in, something you want to share, or a link or something like that, that's great. Throw it in the chat. We want to see all that happening. But if you have a specific question for the panelists, we're going to ask you to submit that through the Q&A feature on the bottom of the Zoom bar. And then, I think you're all already automatically muted in this webinar feature, but just in case, sometimes people, get distracted, they're on the phone, they have 6 different screens going during webinars, just trying to stay muted unless you're asked to come off mute. And then we are recording this, as I said earlier, and these slides will also be available to you after this meeting. So no need to take screenshots or take a lot of notes. We'll make sure that you have everything you need after it's over. So we do want to know a little bit about you. So if you could introduce yourself in the chat with your name and your affiliation. And because it is Community School Coordinator Appreciation Week, could you shout out your favorite community school coordinator or write a special thank you to all the coordinators in Maryland? And this link and this QR code goes to our Kudo board where we're collecting some thank yous to community school coordinators writ large across the state, which we're going to share at the end of the week. So I also want to shout out Bria Robinson, who's the coordinator for the coalition. She couldn't actually be here today because she had a family emergency, but she it has helped coordinate all the special events we are trying to do as a coalition for Appreciation Week. And I know Jessica also has some exciting Community School Appreciation Week information.
I just want to let you know, Ellie, I've gotten a message about the chat not being enabled. So
Oh, let's see if we can do that.
if we can fix that, so that everybody can introduce,
Yep, it should
in
be
the
fixed
chat.
now.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, for letting us know, Daveda. Appreciate you. And please, if you would, just thank you, Heidi, for kicking that off. Announce yourself, introduce yourself in the chat, where you, your name and where you're from. And thanks for, shouting out your favorite community school coordinators. I have some faves of my own. I just want to give a couple shout outs very quickly, and then I want to turn it to our main event. It's just so great to see all these things in the chat, just like all the love. I wanted to just say quickly that I just recently come back from the Eastern Shore from a visit with community schools in Wacomico and Somerset counties. Big shout out to the work being done at Greenwood and Beaver Run and Princess Anne, like great stuff happening out there. I was really blown away. A lot of my work is in Baltimore City, or has been, and I want to just give a shout out there. I was at Federal Hill yesterday. I don't know if Amanda Richardson is here, but she is an amazing community school coordinator. I will be at Bel Air Edison tomorrow, coming to meet and greet community schools. And big shout out to Scott Johnson, who is community school coordinator there. There's so many people I would love to just lift up. You do the work. Are there every day doing the real work with families, young people, and community partners. And we wouldn't be here without you. So thank you so much for all that you do. And it's great to see you all today. So let's turn it to our next chapter here and introduce our panelists. Charmayne Turner at the Y, and Joe Manko from Abell Foundation, former principal at Liberty Elementary and AIB member. I'll let you all expand on those great bios, but we're really pleased to have you guys in conversation today.
Do we want to let Joe go, have them each introduce themselves? And
yeah.
Yep. So
Yep.
I will get Joe's slides ready. I'm going to unspotlight us. And I will actually give the floor to Joe for the moment. And Joe, if you just want to say next slide when you're ready, I'm here for you.
Sure. Well, first off, I want to thank everybody for, I'm so honored to be here to present in front of some of my favorite people. I'm a strong believer in community schools and have been with the strategy since, God, maybe 2011, 2010, 2011. Prior to joining the team at the Abell Foundation, I was a proud principal in Baltimore City Schools at Liberty Elementary for 10 years. Just so thankful for our community and all the work we did around building the community school strategy at Liberty. So I don't know if, did we want to go through and have Charmayne introduced, or do you want me to just keep going?
Why don't we have Charmayne just say a quick hello, and then we'll go back to you, Joe.
Sounds great.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you. First and foremost, shout out to all of the community school coordinators across the state. It's so wonderful to hear that we have almost 600 community schools. That's really, really exciting. I am Charmayne Turner. I currently am the Vice President of Youth Development Operations. I work here at the Y in Central Maryland, where I provide oversight for our community school strategy. I was a former community school, I guess you could say coordinator, but at the district level, eons ago, I worked there from 2006 to 2010, where I served as the inaugural community school liaison between the district, the school system, and our local management board, the Family League of Baltimore City. And so I'm just excited to be here today with everyone and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Great. So Ellie, if you want to go to the next slide. So I went over just some of this previously, but I currently work at the Abell Foundation, but I spent 18 years working with Baltimore City Public Schools, first as a 6th and 7th grade social studies teacher, and then a technology coordinator, and then for 10 years as the elementary school principal at Liberty. As I said before, we joined the community school strategy, and I think the 2010-2011 school year. And since then, I've been a huge advocate of community schools. I wear a couple different hats, like I said, a former principal, but I think for purposes of this conversation today, also a researcher. So I recently received my doctoral degree from University of Maryland, College Park, and I did my dissertation on community schools. Beyond that, I'm also a member of the Accountability and Implementation Board, which is the board that's responsible for implementing the blueprint for Maryland's future. Next slide. So I wanted to just go a little bit into my dissertation research, and this isn't going to be very, very long-winded. It's very truncated, but I think it will set some grounding for, I think, the focus of what I wanted to have of the conversation today. But I was fortunate to do my dissertation research. It was a qualitative study, really focusing, a qualitative case study, focusing on one school that joined the community school expansion in 2019 as a result of the blueprint legislation. So, this is a recently formed community school in 2019. So at this point, still pretty new into the strategy. I conducted my research during the 22-23 school year. So at that point, really only the third year of implementation, and then some of those years of implementation being during COVID. So, just a very challenging time for schools in general and community schools in specific. But I really wanted to raise up the school because what they had been able to do in such a short amount of time was really remarkable. And I think it's clearly a testament to the community school coordinator, the guidance that they had from their lead agency, and the school that I had researched, they are part of they have a lead agent that helps support their work and helps them with professional development and guidance and helping to make network connections, and the leadership of at the school, both the administrative leadership, but also the parent leadership and the teacher leadership in the school. But I would say even beyond that, what I saw there that they had developed in just a really, really short amount of time, I think was also a testament to the larger community schools ecosystem, because the elements of the program that they had been able to implement there effectively, so much of that was a result of years of learning from community schools that had preceded them. And forming connections with networks, going through and creating innovative solutions. I think one of the best examples I give for this is, I know when I was the leader of a community school, and we launched our food pantry program in 2012, 2013, and at that point it was a real novelty. There was very few schools that had a food pantry program. I remember Arnie Duncan had come to the school and he said, "This is amazing. I haven't seen a school like this where parents are coming and doing, basically their grocery shopping at the school." And now, 10 years later, this is a mainstay in many community schools across Baltimore City and across the state. So it really shows the distance that we have come in terms of the implementation of the strategy, and how each year that passes, we're really standing on the shoulders of people who have come before us, and community school coordinators and school principals and district leaders that have come before us that have helped to build and shape the strategy so that each year it gets more ubiquitous, more universal, and more robust. Next slide. So the main findings from my study, and some of this is, for those of you who are in the biz, right, it's going to be, this is going to be commonplace for you. But, first and foremost, the importance of people, the principal, the community school coordinator, the key parent leaders at this school in particular, the secretary. I mean, we are in as educators, we are in a human-powered business, and the importance of people in that equation cannot be understated. For this particular case study, it was really amazing the role that the lead agency played in terms of being a connector, a manager, a professional development provider. I think two of the other main findings is, I think contrary to what some of the research would lead you to believe, there was still a very siloed nature within this really outstanding implementation of the community school strategy. There was still very much a divide between the academic and community functions of the school. I wonder if, as you reflect on how the strategy has been implemented in your school or in your district, if you're seeing the same thing. And I don't know, at the end of the day, there's really no judgments on it. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think oftentimes in the research, you see these as being less siloed and more cohesive, but you still see very much, these are the academic functions of the school, these are the community functions of the school, these are the folks that work on the community side, and these are the folks that work on the academic side. So just a larger question to leave for the community. But I think this fourth point is the one that I really wanted to focus on today, which is, I think despite all of the amazing things that were being implemented at this school, there was still very much the relationship with the parents was really focused on service delivery, and it seemed like there was a need for deeper connection with the parents and with the community, in terms of like elevating their voices and having them serve in a leadership role. And I think it's one of the things that as I look at community school implementation across the state, I think we're at a very pivotal point, and trying to figure out as we move forward with the strategy, is the community school strategy really about service delivery, or is it about really elevating and empowering our families and our community? So yeah, go to the next slide. So it brings me to this slide, and I wanted to elevate this because I think, as was seen in the case study research at this one particular school, I presume this is maybe a fairly universal challenge across the state. Each community school is asked to do a needs assessment and to look at the assets, but I do think so often we're looking at the needs side and not necessarily the asset side. And because of that, at least in many cases, or at least in cases of new community schools, there is oftentimes a one-directional flow, where it is schools providing for families and not necessarily going through and elevating the skills, talents, energy of the families in order to contribute back to the school. So, I think this at the bottom, community schools are not about what you can do for the community, but what you can do with the community. And I think really looking at that moving forward, what are ways that we can better access the assets that the community has to bring in order to make the strategy much more robust. Going to the next slide. So, as I was just saying, I think this is a bit of a challenge for the community as a whole, and I wonder if it's a question that each of us should be asking ourselves as community school coordinators, as district managers, as advocates, is have we done justice to focusing as much energy and attention on parenting community leadership as we have service delivery? I think in a lot of schools that I go into, there's still, they have highly functioning food pantry programs or programs to get dental services to students, but in those exact same schools, there's oftentimes not a functioning PTO or parent leadership group. So, what can we do to focus more energy and attention on building up the capacity of our community and really drawing on their strengths and their resources? Second on this bullet is building structures for community leadership and contribution. So, the PTO being a primary mechanism for that, but I think there are other ways that parents can go through and exercise informal leadership within the school, or that you can go through and operationalize and harness their energy and their time and talents in order to contribute to the school. And then brainstorming ways that families can help support the school. So I think, some of this is maybe even just school leaders and community school coordinators getting together with their teams and coming up with a list of like, gosh, these are all sorts of things that it would be way easier or way better at our school to do if we had more hands on deck, or we had more help, or we could rely on more voice or expertise. So I think the challenge for this community, and the challenge I would give to everybody on this call, is to really look at these three bullets and figure out, do your own kind of assessment of your school community, and are we doing these three things well? And if not, what could we do to better actualize these three bullets? And I have a couple examples from my experience as a school leader in ways that we went through and tried to harness the skills and talents of our family members. And I'll go through just a couple of them, just so that this is you can see that this, for one, this is possible, and hopefully you have some examples of ways that this could be actualized in your school. But for one, at Liberty, really focusing on the PTO, and I will say some of this was very fortuitous because we had just really outstanding leaders at our school that were very dedicated and very present. But if you walked into Liberty Elementary, the first people you would meet as you entered the door was a table where our PTO was there, and they were there consistently, really every day. I mean, our PTO president would get there before I got there, and she would leave after I got there. And these are all people that are, they are volunteering, they are giving their time and energy, but they're dedicated to the school, and this was part of their community. And I think something, how satisfying to be a parent at that school, and the first presence that you get when you get into the school is a member of the PTO that's welcoming you even before you hit the doors of the office. So I think, like I said, I think we were very fortunate. It was a unique situation to have such dedicated group that would commit their time and energy to sit there and be present at the school every day. But I think if you asked around, there are probably many families that would want to try to find ways to get better involved in the school, and this might be one opportunity for them. At the school, one of our big focuses was trying to get many adults in the classrooms. I think there was a big focus on differentiated instruction and personalized instruction. My goal was to try to get 3 adults in every classroom. So it would be a lead teacher, oftentimes a classroom aide, and then oftentimes a parent volunteer. So, during our PTO meetings, we would go through and we would make calls out for parents who were interested in serving in support roles within the classroom. They wouldn't necessarily, they couldn't be there every day, but even if you could be there one day a week and it was consistent so that every Friday morning you knew you had an extra set of hands from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock. And we would go through and we would train those parents so that they would pull small groups and they would be working individually with kids. They would go through and they would help do formative assessments. So, I think some of this develops over time and it really takes a committed community. But, anybody who is on this call, if you were asked the question, would you benefit from having more hands on deck? I think everybody would say yes, whether it be helping in the classroom, helping in the cafeteria, helping to direct kids to and from different places in the building. So there's a lot of opportunities for parents to get involved. And there's a lot of parents that want to get involved. They just haven't been asked. The third example I'm going to give, and this is really quick, but one of the areas where we found that parents were really excited to get involved was, they identified in the morning we had a very, very small parking lot and small traffic circle for a very large school, and it would get real hectic in the morning. And I had a group of parents that came to me and they said, well, what can we do about this? And I said, well, let's sit down and brainstorm and figure it out. And the parents came back to me and they said, we want to schedule a group that's there in the morning that welcomes kids into the building, that walks them to and from the car to the front door of the building and helps to monitor the traffic flow within the morning. And all we need is these yellow safety vests. And at that point, we got the yellow safety vests. And every morning we had a group of parent volunteers that were there helping to move, ensure the traffic flow, walking kids to and from the front door of the building. And then the last example is, we had a painter in the community. So, this is one of those things where there are tons of folks within our communities that have specialized skills, whether they be chefs or they be painters or carpenters. This gentleman from our community, he would go through and, every spring break or winter break, I would let him into the building and he would come in with his buckets of paint, and any wall that he saw that was starting to fray or peel off, he would go through and paint. And this guy was extremely talented. He didn't need tape. He had just such precise hands. And, but, it would be so refreshing to have the kids come back from a holiday break and their hallway would be repainted. And I think there are many examples of ways that we can have community members go through and use their skills and their talents in order to help improve upon the school and make it better. So, I think that this is the last slide that I wanted to focus on. But, I think overall the big takeaway I'm hoping that you get from this conversation, and one of the big takeaways I got from my dissertation research is, while there's so much being done in so many community schools around service delivery, I think having some additional focus on the alternate flow, right? This isn't this community school strategy isn't just a unidirectional flow of resources and services going from our schools to our families and our communities, but also what are ways that the families and communities are coming back and reciprocating their level of involvement, their energy, their talents, and their interests in order to help make the school better. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Charmayne, and I want to thank everybody for allowing me to be part of this conversation, especially on Community School Coordinator Week. And thank you to everybody across the state who is working to power this, really grassroots, ground-up strategy to make Maryland community schools outstanding. Over to you, Charmayne.
Great, thank you, Joe. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. As a former student of Liberty Elementary from first grade to fourth grade, I remember coming back into the school during your time as a principal, and just seeing all of the changes and how great, and those differences from the school now to when it was back in the 70s, late 70s when I was a student there. And so thank you for your leadership and for your research and informing us. What I will say is that I listened to a lot of what you shared, and what is coming to mind to me is the community schools forward and that will, right? And some of those buzzwords that come out of that will from the essentials for community school transformation. And what I heard was integrated systems of support, right? Where you're having your families come in as assets, and you're being inclusive of the community at large. Partnerships and relationships. I heard a lot of that in this last slide, right? Where there is those partnerships and those relationships that exist simply because you asked, for no other reason, right? But just simply because you asked. And then sharing, right? Being open to the parent of the PTO was in the building before I got there, and when I left, she was still there, right? And what does that look like to share the space with the community and with your families? And if you look at the community schools forward, all of that is in that will, right? Thank you, Ellie, for lifting that. From a service delivery, one of the other things that I heard you say is this service delivery model, right? And are we looking at our assets at the same time that we're looking for what the needs are, right? And how are we best combining them? I think as a community school lead agency working with several schools in Baltimore City, that we are positioned, as many other community school agencies are lead agencies in partnerships with schools, that we're positioned to do a little bit of that, right? Where are those assets in the community, and what do we bring as an organization when it comes to those assets to help support, build, grow, develop? And at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to help the principal to shine, and we want to assure that children, youth, and families have a voice and they get their needs heard or get their needs met. And so it's kind of like this combination of all these things in the ecosystem. And so a few things that I thought about was just advocacy, right? What does that look like as an asset from community school lead agencies to be able to advocate on behalf of children, youth, and families, and to be able to teach and support children, youth, and families in being able to advocate for themselves? Something that in many cases a school cannot do because of public dollars and all of the politics and the bureaucracy that is connected to it. But we have that as an asset that we can bring to that school in support of that school. One of the other areas that you talked about, or that I thought about, was how, as an organization, we bring all of who we are to the table. So we bring human resources. We bring the opportunity to be able to write grants, social and emotional learning, academic, as well as attendance support. And so while that is, many of those things are that service delivery model, it's rooted in who we are as an organization and the assets that we have to be able to support, right? And so I would say, from an organizational perspective, the same way that you look at it from the parent perspective, that is a both and. Again, where as an organization in the community, we are an asset for many different things, not only just for service delivery, right? But again, we bring all of who we are to the table. I think about the fact that, and I can only speak for the why, how, one of the assets that we bring to the table is the fact that we have Y family centers. And those centers are open to all of our community schools, and young people that are in the service delivery part of our programming also get an opportunity for them and their families to come to the Y for free, right? And that is an asset that we offer that is not necessarily a service in the same way, but just an asset where you can come and work out in the Y and do whatever you want to do once you get there, right? And so that is another thing. And then one of the other things that that you shared that I wrote down, I was thinking about this community school steering committee thought process, right? And this model of how do we model that at the district level of what a community school steering committee could look like and could be, to assure that you have the voice of the community at that table. And then what does that look like when you trickle down to what does that look like when you trickle down to a school, and how it is not performative, so to speak, to have a community school steering committee, but where their voice is really heard, and we listen and we react based on, you know, those things that we heard in partnership, right? Going back to those integrated systems of support, that inclusivity, that partnership, those relationships, and then sharing all of who we are as a community. And and for me, parents are the community as well. And so when I say community, I am also sharing that with parents. The last thing, well, a few other things that I would say is we could also just ask our families, like, what do you bring to the table? Like you said, Joe, like, what is it in our organizations and our community? And it's so many people. I'm thinking about, many of you all are familiar right now with the Enough grant. This is like, you know, the buzz right now in the state of Maryland, and how this this proposal is having communities to rethink what it means to be in community and in collaboration with one another, to move the community forward and to be able to have viable communities, right? And it's the same thing in a community school. It is, where are and I always say, where's the grandmom in the community? Because the grandmom in the community who has been there for the last 45 years knows everything and everyone and where to connect to. Find the grandmom in the community or the grandmom on the block, and she could tell you and connect you to any and everyone, right? Even she could even share with you the little mischievous children in walking down the block and so on. And but in a loving way, right? We all know that this is hard work. This is hard work. This is the work of love. And so not in this deficit kind of way, but in an asset-based way, right? And so those are some of the things that I think, you know, when we're coming from the perspective of an organization, and how we can balance and marry a service delivery model with where those assets are in the community, for it to be a win-win and a happy medium for everyone, because those services are needed. However, community schools, the way that I understand it, was never meant to be done in isolation, and we're in the building and we're coming to the outside to ask you to bring and give us something. This is not the poor little desolate children in the communities, and we need to bring them something as if they're broken, right? It's like they came here and they're in these schools already whole. And then what can we do to support what assets are in the community already, where we can leverage those assets, and then to begin to work together for those integrated systems of support. So that's what I would add to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you, for amazing, well, the research that you've done, Joe, so informative. And Charmayne, thank you for your comments and reflections from a practitioner perspective. And who knew that you were a student at Liberty Elementary? That is an amazing connection to make, and so great. I just appreciate this so much. Actually, have had the opportunity to bring researchers and practitioners together all over the country. And I'm super glad to be able to do this in Maryland, because it's so important. The notions of bidirectionality, like the two-way street of the community and the school going back and forth, That's one big takeaway. Another major takeaway is to think about this asset-based work. We talk about needs, and I think we do need to talk a little bit more about assets and what our communities bring. That is really what we're shooting for. For those of you who are CSCs or community school coordinators or facilitators, liaisons, what have you, or you work in the district, right? How are we enacting this in our own practice? How are we modeling this for others? All of that is really important for us to lift up today, because that's really where we're going, where we want the work to go. Immediately when you hit the ground running, you're like, how do I get all the partners? How do I meet all the needs? And that's incredibly important. But there are answers right in our own communities. There are resources right there in front of us that we need to lift up. So with that, I know there are a bunch of questions in the chat that I just want to be able to get to. And so if that's okay, Joe and Charmayne, I think, well, a couple of these are directed toward Joe, but and I see, Joe, you've answered a couple of them in the chat already. But then please, if you have questions that are coming up as you hear the answers, don't hesitate to put more in the Q&A. But one question from Deveda Coley, who comes from Frederick County, and she asks, did you find that any of the stakeholders were more important? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you find that any of the stakeholders maybe more important than the other? I'm not sure. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the question. But no, it's okay. No worries about typos. We all do it in this Zoom world. But maybe talk a little bit to the stakeholder feedback.
Yeah, I would say in the study, and it's hard because I don't know if I would elevate one stakeholder over the other. I think, all stakeholders in this equation, whether they be, teachers or involved parents or, even students, were all critical to, actualizing the strategy and making it work in the most efficient manner. I will say that, when in the qualitative research just going through, you can kind of tag how often people are referenced. And, I think by no surprise, really the community school coordinator and in this school in particular, the principal, were referenced by many stakeholders on multiple occasions. So, I think, and this is supported by the larger research on community schools that, really the community school coordinator and the principal are very, very critical actors in an effective implementation of the strategy. But I wouldn't say that there are stakeholders that are more important. I would say in the study and in the research, the principals and community school coordinators are referenced most frequently as being very critical.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, of course.
And the next question actually is about that role of the principal. Rachel Durham at Notre Dame, nice to see you, has asked, as a former principal and now researcher of the community schools, what role does a principal have in supporting the CSC? And she especially references the idea that if the principal is highly invested in the strategy, it seems like they empower the community school coordinator. So maybe speak a little bit to the role of the principal.
Yeah, and also I wanted to thank you, Dr. Durham, because you were referenced several times in the study. So, or your research was referenced. So, appreciate everything that you have done to help build this community and keep us better informed and equipped to implement the strategy. But I would say there were a couple, at least in this case study, a couple really, really key areas where the principal played a really pivotal role. I think first and foremost, just creating a welcoming community. Like it was referenced by teachers, parents on multiple occasions, how they felt so comfortable at the school, how they felt like his presence in the building, his welcoming face every morning during arrival, how he was so approachable. Like all of those, I think, set up the requisites for effective implementation of the strategy. It's really hard to have an effective community school implementation if the school by nature is very standoffish, right? If there's a implicit messaging that parents are not welcome or don't belong in the building, or in order to get access to the building, you have to go through multiple layers in order to get an audience with the school principal. And I think in this case study, the principal just being so present within the community, I think went a long way to setting up the requisites for effective implementation of the strategy. I think the other area where this principle was really critical, and that was mentioned by several of the stakeholders, especially the community school coordinator, is more or less giving a lot of a kind of autonomy and support, right? I mean, it was like there were so many references in the study to where the principal, if you brought an idea to the principal would, it was understood that you would have to do a lot for the principal to say no. Like the nature, the orientation of the principal was, if you think that we can do this, what are the resources that I can provide you in order to make it work, right? So I think that was the orientation of this principle, that a lot of it was when the stakeholders, whether it be the community school coordinator or teachers or parents, came to him with something that they felt like could be done to make things better for the community, the principal was always on board and was just there to say, well, what can we do to support? Let me go through and figure out, we can go through and figure out how we can, overcome these hurdles. But there was a perpetual sense of possibility. And I think that was really, really critical, at least in the case study, as a way that the principal helped to empower the community and the coordinator, and then ultimately the strategy at the school.
Jessica,
Thanks.
can I add to that?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
No, that was just, just beautifully, and in the way that partnership happened with that community school coordinator and that principal. How wonderful it would be if we had all principals that operated, in that same way. What I would say though is, in my experience, what I've found is once a principal is really educated in understanding and knowing what the role is of their community school coordinator and the possibilities, as Joe shared, that exists with that role, that relationship, it forms in a very different way, to be able to have that level of autonomy, that trust, as well as we have some community schools, or in my experience through the years, where that person is almost like a third administrator in the building, right? Literally, that's their role. And so every leadership meeting, every finance meeting, there's no space that community school coordinator is not in, sitting at that table, understanding the bigger picture of the goals and the vision of that principal in the school. And where that is absent, that it looks a little different, right? But in educating some of those principals that we work with through the years, they were like, oh, I didn't realize that they could do this, or that the relationship could look like this, or I thought this. And it does look different also with a lead agency in that relationship than when the principal is actually the supervisor of that person, right? And so that is a tad bit of a different dynamic, because the expectation coming in from a lead agency and that MOU is that person is sitting at those tables to be able to understand the bigger vision of the school and be able to put themselves in the spaces and places to help meet them. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, no, thank you for lifting all that up. So important. This question about the principal is coming up a lot in the Q&A, and I just, before we turn to this this next set of questions, just want to add, like, how all the research tells us how important that relationship between principal and community school coordinator, facilitator is. In fact, the work that we're doing at the center in our community of practice, one of the communities of practice that's launching this fall, folks had to apply in a team. You had to have a principal and a community school person there in order to really deepen that work and move forward. And so someone asked, and I will get to the steering committee question in just a second, but just to stay on this principal thing for a second, somebody asked, well, how do you get the principal to, quote, want to know this information? How do you get them to work with a community school coordinator? In other words, if we can't force that administrator, to make that happen. So, this person is looking for some hope here. And I think there absolutely is that hope. But I'll let Joe and Charmayne, either one of you want to hop in and talk about this.
You want to take this one, Charmayne, or you want me to?
Yeah. Charmayne, I think you're muted, so just make sure that you're.
No, I was saying, yes, Joe, take that one.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so I think this is a challenging question because I think I've definitely seen cases where the principal is not, is not that committed to the strategy, and they either inherited a school that was already a community school and they haven't been educated about it. They are just trying to get their feet under them, trying to get the basic functions of the school operationalized. So like taking on something that is seen as very robust or additional auxiliary. Like I think oftentimes you run into a challenge where people presume this isn't my role, right? Like my role is to be here to observe teachers and to implement curriculum. So I would say a couple things. One, I think I do think some of this was there's a kernel of this in the presentation that I just made, right? Like I think where the community school strategy becomes a hard sell is, like I said, when it is a one-directional flow and it's just from the school to the community, right? And I think trying to transform that conversation and elevate ways that the community is going through to support and benefit the school, I think helps to make that argument. I think also just things that you're doing within the school that show success of the strategy, whether it be we've had this many volunteers, we've had these the team has helped to improve attendance by this amount, we have lower chronic absenteeism since we've been implementing the strategy, right? I think really like leaning into these kind of hard metrics of ways that you've been able to improve the school, I think is one vehicle for trying to get greater buy-in from principals that are maybe not as familiar or not as committed with the strategy. But I think it is challenging, especially because principals and their support of the strategy is so critical to the success of the community school implementation.
There's a lot of information going on in the chat right now about this. Some great ideas. First about just really being intentional about principal PD, and I'm moving slides as I do scroll through these. And then also using principles that are champions to educate other principals as well. Exciting. I know we did have that steering committee questions standing out there. I don't know if anybody has a pat answer for that. I know often steering committees are more driven by roles, right? Like making sure you have the right roles.
I'd love to jump in on this because I think actually the two questions in the chat are tied together.
Right.
There's a question that asks how many members would be appropriate for a steering committee, like a number. And then there's a question about burnout. How do we avoid burnout? And to me, those are two questions tied together, because in order to have less burnout, you have more people at the table, right? Taking on the work. And there's no clear number, right, that we're going for, whether it's 5 or 8 or 10, it really depends, I think, highly on where you are. But it's a question of, right, how many and the representation of those communities. So I'm curious, maybe from Charmayne to like, have you weigh in a little bit on, how do you get that broad representation from folks in a community school sitting on a steering committee and also taking on the work so that there's burnout that doesn't happen on one person who's holding all the responsibilities?
Yep, so I've actually seen this model work really well in a school where the community school coordinator really knew and understood intimately how to galvanize the community, right? And this was a person who, when they completed their community school needs assessment, they really dug deep into that community assessment to look at those needs and those root causes and begin to think about where are all of the spaces and places that I need and the people or the resources that I need in order to address some of these root causes and address some of those things that are an impact of those root causes, right? And so this person came to, the conclusion that I actually need a little bit of everyone. I need some political officials on my steering committee meeting, right? On my steering committee. I need families. I need the young people. I need some of the teachers that are in the building on my steering committee. I need the community based organization that is around the corner. I need the business community, right? And when this person did that, one of the things that I thought was really great, she was able to also get grants and funding because of the fact that she had all of those people connected into the community. And here's the one thing I would say, because I know we're running out of time. So to answer that question, it is really take the time to honestly look at your needs assessment to see where those needs are, and then to figure out who in the community and where those assets are that could help support fill those needs. Not always, like Joe said, a service delivery, but if a need is paint, how can we find the painter that is in the community? If a need is the walking school bus because there's a main street and we don't have a crossing guard, where is the person in the community that can be the persons that could build a coalition together to have that walking bus into the school? And so that was the one thing. But this person, just by mere fact of having all of those people at the table, this was at a high school. And what was brilliant about this particular person in this high school was she looked at all of the zip codes that were represented in her school versus just the community directly around her school. Because we, in Baltimore, we are a choice district, right? And I know everyone on the call, that doesn't exist, but in Baltimore, we are a choice district. And so when she did that, she began inviting people in some of those other communities where there were large populations of her young people coming from those communities. And then she began tapping into the community organizations in those communities. And she began having even events and parent nights and so on in the communities versus only in the school, right? But as a result of that, she was able to build relationships of people just coming in, right? Next thing you know, like she never had to run her food pantry anymore. The community literally took over the pantry. Right. And so that was one less thing that she had to think about and do. She found that responsible and committed family member, that person came in. And I won't even say responsible because that's not the word that I want. The committed family member who just wanted to be there to be helpful. And then that was what, and she did all of the training. There was a small stipend that she gave that person. And then that was one less thing that she had to think about because the community at that point just took over the pantry. And now she had freed up time to do some other things that would not allow her to get to the point of burnout. That's an example.
Thanks, Charmayne. We're at 1 o'clock, so I think we just want to appreciate all of you for being here with us and so highly engaged in this conversation, which tells us we need to do more. So we will. Keep in touch with
Yes.
us. Ellie, go ahead.
Just
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. Make sure you visit our website, sign up with our newsletters, email us if you want us to do that, to make sure you're on our lists. Our emails are there on the slide, and we look forward to doing this again relatively soon, and having a continued conversation throughout the year about how we can really learn from each other to make our community schools thrive here in Maryland. And happy Community School Coordinator Appreciation Week, everybody. Please get on social media, share all the good things about community schools that you can, and we will see you next time.
Wow, what a great session.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you all. This was fabulous.
All right, I'm ending it right now.
All right,
Thanks,
thanks
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.